Hey guys, it's Emily, and you're about to watch a new episode of Strange Mosaic with my good friend Berdie. First of all, I want to apologize to Berdie because I was a goddamn chatterbox and couldn't shut up. Um, it's frustrating sometimes as I've been working on this for years that I feel like I get better at pacing myself and letting other people speak. And then every once in a while, I have a show where I just go buck wild. So, my apologies. I think there were lots of interesting things in this show anyway, and Bertie, by his nature, just doesn't talk as much as I do. So, hopefully, you'll still find the show enjoyable. But the main reason I'm recording this intro is that two things happened since I recorded this show about 2 weeks ago that made me think of things that are pertinent to what we talked about here that I just wanted to show you all. I don't have time to edit the video and cut it in near the parts where we talk about it, so I'm just going to do it now. But I thought they were sort of worthy of a little look-see. The first thing that happened was immediately after recording the show, my good friend Masaki sent me some sort of like Instagram short about the Mayan Theater in Los Angeles and how it was haunted. Um, Misaki and I have never spoken about the Mayan Theater, and the fact that he would send it to me as soon as I finished recording a show where similar topics came up was interesting. But it also reminded me, in fact, that there was a Mayan Theater in Los Angeles. And I just wanted to show you guys a couple of pictures from the inside so that when you hear what Berdie and I get into talking about, you'll see how the two things sort of connect. So this is the Mayan Theater in Los Angeles. I'm showing you right now like a picture sort of from the viewpoint of whoever is working like lights and sound in the back. So right here, you can see there's all of these interesting Mayan carvings of faces and calendars and whatnot. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. Up here is the stage. In fact, like there are columns that almost look like some of the speaker systems that I was speaking of, right? The columns that have the Mayan god faces on them literally almost look like speaker cabinets, and you'll understand why I'm saying this when you hear what Berdie and I talk about. And then this is what it looks like when it's sort of lit up. And they have been using for many years, but certainly recently, the Mayan theater for a lot of dance music events, right? So you're basically almost like inside of a Mayan step pyramid or a Mayan temple and hearing electronic music and all of this stuff that during the daytime is these natural colors ends up looking sort of like this. And when you hear what we're talking about, you'll understand why I felt like I wanted to show this to you. So that was one thing that happened. Oh, here's another picture that's kind of interesting, right? You can kind of see all the parts and pieces of these things that look somewhat like art and somewhat like technology. This is what it looks like from the outside, right? So completely in line with what we are speaking about, right? Okay. And then the next thing I wanted to show you, and I noticed this just, I guess maybe it was yesterday or the day before. Laura and I are going to Mayan Warrior Sound System this weekend in Austin. And for those of you who follow Glass Bead Game and Project Kids, you may remember that Michael and I did some shows, and I talked about it some other places about my experience 2 years ago at Mayan Warrior Sound System. And for some reason, when I was doing the show with Berdie and we were talking about all of this stuff, I completely spaced and didn't even think about my experience with Mayan Warrior. But they'll be back here this weekend. And since that last time we talked about them, their art car burned down or something. There was a fire, and they've been touring without it, doing sort of fundraisers to build a new one. And I know this is sort of their last fundraiser before the new car is debuted. But anyway, I thought I would show you guys, and for those people who follow me on a regular basis, you'll understand the significance of this. This is the flyer for Mayan Warrior Sound System for this weekend, right? Now it's at the Concourse Project, which is not downtown. It's actually out by the airport. But for some reason, they are using this as the advertisement. And this is literally, quote unquote, the blast zone that I always talk about when I'm talking about Austin, the area that I talk about as being my portal or whatever it is. And they have constructed a pyramid right in that middle of it. And this is the advertisement for Mayan Warrior. Anybody who's sort of familiar with all of the things that I have to say about the river and the lake in downtown Austin and the buildings and the power plant and the bridges and whatnot, this is significant, right? So they have this pyramid, which also I think I've even spoken about how when Austin is all lit up at night from certain angles, it looks like a pyramid or like the Giza Plateau. But anyway, more on this sort of Mayan god related to sound and whatnot, all sort of happening at the same time. So, okay. I think that's it about the addendums. And you'll understand why I showed you that when you hear the conversation. So this is part one. Part two for supporters will be out next week. And then when I decide to put part one out publicly, you'll be able to go straight to Patreon or locals to find part two right away. Enjoy the show, and I will see you soon. Thanks, guys. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is Strange Mosaic. I am in a new office, in a new apartment. Not everything is set up yet. It feels weird. I don't like my hair, but my good friend, my good friend, I feel like I have the bird flu because my good friend Berdie is here. And we are going to chat out-of-body experiences, dreamtime, multi-dimensional cities, and whatever else comes up. Berdie, it's been a while. How are you, my friend?
Doing all right. Yeah, just trying to survive in all the weirdness.
Are you in a new house or a new apartment? You're always in a different room, so I never know if you're in a new place or just a different part of the old.
No, I just set up some contraption right here and on the dining room table so I could
Ah,
have an elevated platform for the phone. But it's just my living room. Yeah.
all right. I never,
Yeah.
sometimes you're like on the bed, right? Like on the side of the bed, I can tell. Like I mean, you just makeshift everything. So okay, I wasn't sure if you guys had moved. So
Yeah.
still in the same place. World is crazy. I want to run an idea by you before we get started here, right? So you're Ukrainian, correct?
Russian.
Are you Russian or Ukrainian?
Russia. I was born in Russia. A lot of my family is Ukrainian.
Okay, all right. So
I was, yeah, I was born in Moscow.
you have the battle going on inside of yourself to reflect that the turmoil of the outer world. Okay.
Yeah.
Without getting into the nature of Vladimir Putin or like the exoteric reasons we're given for why this war is happening, the most interesting thing I thought Putin said in that interview with Tucker Carlson, right, was the line where he said, in reality, there is no such thing as a Ukrainian. What the word Ukrainian really means is people who live on the fringe, right? And you know, like I consider everything that he says, like from or everything everyone says, not just him, from like,
Yeah.
okay, how else can we look at that? And it made me think a little bit of like gypsies or weirdos or outsiders, right? And almost everyone I know who has like the really bizarre edge experiences, right? Have some Ukrainian in them, right? Myself, Michael Wan, there's a gentleman that I finally got to have a chat with who's been interviewed a couple of times on the Melt. His name is Joe Kreisstupa. He has had some very strange experiences yourself, right? Like, I'm wondering if there's something to that, if there is something about, quote, Ukrainian people or people who live on the fringe, right, that other people sometimes find disturbing.
Well, the place represents fertility because it has some of the best soil in the world.
Right.
So I guess that's sort of an archetype for gypsy freedom, perhaps. I don't know, but that could be a deeper reason for all this because fertile soil, fertility, abundance, that's what people are trying to take, right? They're trying to take from that.
Well, the other thing that I think might go hand in hand with fertile soil,
Yeah,
right? Because the fertile soil is based on the minerals that are present in the soil.
right.
At those locations may also be portals. And so
Yeah,
people with the trace elements or minerals in their blood that resonate with that which is present in the ground there are your travelers, right?
yes,
One
yeah,
of the groups of people that Michael and I started looking into are this Ben Ishmael tribe, right? And this is connected in some ways to like Moorish science, if you've looked into Moorish science at all, right?
mm,
They were this tribe that lived in the Indianapolis area, and they would make this triangular trek every year at the same time,
oh
right?
yeah,
And the area that they were circling around is known as the Holy Harmonic Mountain, right?
wow,
There's a
okay,
mountain, right? And so we're looking at that and like we're using modern day language for this, but like, is there some sort of hyper dimensional like cube dance floor like zone in there that they're sort of circling it because they're actually going in and out of the mountain to move between timelines or dimensions or whatever it is. And if you look
hmm,
at Indianapolis is one of the best cities to understand zoning or like
okay,
where they're allowed to build buildings that are high and where they're not and how they have to be angled and which part of the building has to be highest and all this weird stuff that we got into looking at, right? Um,
hmm,
so like I think some of these, my guess would be with any of this stuff is that there are versions of these types of locations that occur quote unquote naturally or organically.
yeah, yeah,
Right, Zoom
yeah,
likes my right, and then there's other versions where someone has tried to replicate these things technologically, right, or with
right,
science.
right,
And the things we think of as being natural or organic may just be such a previous version of technology that we don't recognize it as such. So we think it's
yeah,
cool, but it's just like got more like dust on it because it's old, right?
yeah, hmm,
Okay. So this group did this, and this was a group that was sort of, the uniquely a unique genetic makeup, right? Ukrainians may be another version of that, like a different one, but the similar idea,
yeah,
right? And and what really may be going on in this battle, which is not a new battle because this was also going on during the time of the Nazis and World War II, and
yeah,
of course we had Chernobyl over there or whatever, is that it's an open secret, so secret for most people because most people aren't read into how the world really works, but people who are in the know understand that the veil is thin there, right? That the veil is
hmm,
thinner there, and that some people can do it naturally,
yeah,
right? Generally, that would be people who are from there because they've been eating food that was grown in that soil. So they have trace minerals inside of them that resonate with the larger mineral deposits in the ground, right? That make them adequate travelers for that portal, right? So you either, depending on your motives, want those people around or don't, right?
Yeah.
If you want to control the portal, you don't want them around. If you want to study the portal, maybe you do want them around, right?
Yeah.
And what you really love, if you're a control freak with no talent, but good at managing things and stealing ideas from other people, is to find a perfect technological replicator of the thing that you don't have the natural ability to do, and starting to build that at the location where you know it's possible that it can happen is probably easier than like maybe the only other way to make a veil thin naturally is to do like an atomic bomb in a certain location to sort of open that up, right? Or a fission or a fusion reactor or a particle accelerator, right? To sort of thin that. But we don't even know at this point if those places are thin because those other things have happened there, or if they put them there, or if they put the things there because it's already thin. If they put the particle accelerator or the fusion reactor, like we don't know the whole chain of events, right? But it seems to me that like Ukraine, right, in certain areas of Ukraine that are in contention here, may be fertile in more than one arena. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I could definitely sense that when I was there too. Um, that there was something particularly special about Crimea,
Uh-huh.
which is maybe that's why they took it first. But there was this Orthodox monastery that my mom took me to with my stepdad, and it was deep in the mountains in Crimea, and it was one of the only places I've ever been to that had like this massive, like truly holy energy, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
Like you were there and you just felt like this intense life force. And you know what's interesting about that mountain is that when Russia took over Crimea, they took over all that land
Mhm.
where that monastery is and they turned it into a military base.
Aha. Okay.
So there you go. There's your clue right there.
Is it called the Sarai Cave Monastery?
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take a
Wow.
look.
I don't
Right.
even remember, and you got it right.
All right. So here we go. Oh boy. Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. The Assumption Monastery of the Caves is located in Crimea near Bakirsky. How do you say it?
Bakhshisarai.
Sarai. It is a
Yeah.
cave monastery carved out of a cliff. The date of the monastery's foundation is disputed, although local monks assert that it originated as early as the 8th century, but was abandoned when Byzantium lost its hold on the region. The current monastic establishment dates back to the 15th century. In 1921, the monastery was closed by the Soviet government, right? That's what they always want to do, right? So whenever there's authoritarianism, right?
Mhm.
After the dissolution of the Soviet Union and Ukrainian independence, the monastery was reopened to the public in 1993. There's another one called the Inkerman Cave Monastery as well. All right, let's go back and just see like a couple of other pictures of this so we can kind of get a feel. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, this is so interesting. Okay, so there's two in Crimea. Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those. I'm
Okay.
trying. I was like 12 years old, so I'm trying to
Okay.
remember exactly. But
That's interesting. Okay, so all right, so that to me that's like set more evidence. The other thing that I noticed that other people might not notice this, but because I was a gymnast and during the like my whole gymnastics reality, like for most of it was while the Soviet Union was still intact, or shortly after. So the gymnasts still were the people who had been trained through the Soviet gymnastic system, which there's no question was the best in the world. A lot of the gymnasts that were the ones that had that special sparkle about them that just like, I don't know how much gymnastics you've ever watched, right? But there's like a quality of performance or a way certain gymnasts do things that is captivating in a way that like even someone else who might technically be better does things is not the same, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those gymnasts were Ukrainian that had that special like sparkle or that something
Yes.
about them that felt otherworldly or like they weren't quite like everybody else. So it's not hard for me to believe that quote unquote Ukrainians may be of this sort of gypsy time traveling nature, right? That is more of like when we think of the differences between people, like even within the same ethnicity, there's different bloodlines,
Yeah.
right? But the difference between quote Ukrainians and other Soviets or Russians may be more of a bloodline difference than like an ethnicity difference, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think there's some connection to Israel with them as well.
Yeah, okay. So I didn't expect you to say that, but I mean, let's go there. Like that seems to be the connection between Israel and Ukraine seems to be the Khazarian thing.
Yeah, I think it all ties back to some Hebrew thing, ultimately, both in Ukraine and Israel. Yeah, even with Putin.
Well, one of the things I think that is so why there's so much hubbub, like why there's so much argument over this very tiny piece of land, right? It's a tiny piece of land over there that they're arguing over, really, right?
Yeah,
In comparison to the entire rest of Russia or the Soviet Union or whatever, this strip of Ukraine that's at issue here is small. And like the thing going on in Israel and Palestine, like literally, like the trail I run around the lake every day is like representative of the area that we're talking about, right?
yeah, yeah, right.
But if there's something on that ground that is interdimensional, right? And if you look at the Israeli flag, the inner portion of the six-pointed star is literally a hypercube, right? It is a hexagon, it is a hypercube, right? That is sort of what we're talking about here is like who controls the hyperdimensional dance floor, right?
Yeah, I think it's similar in Tijuana. I think Tijuana is in that same category, and it's also a war zone in its own right. Just because it's not officially a war zone doesn't mean it's not. Obviously, it is with the drug cartels and everything. And for some reason, I do feel like not just Tijuana, but Mexico in general has some kind of deeply rooted time roots to the Mesoamerican past. Basically, what I think happened is that influences from the deity, from which I believe were real deities that influenced the Mesoamerican cultures in the past, they essentially have a stranglehold on the current timeline and the people of Mexico. So it could be something similar with Israel and Ukraine, where you're talking about, time portals and travel, and there could be some kind of interdimensional deities associated with that. I've had dreams of like Aztec and Mayan gods basically causing chaos, right? So I think there is some kind of time looping going on in terms of influence, and the perpetuation of violence possibly as well could be a part of that, um, to maybe prevent the time travel. I don't know.
So, okay, so just out of curiosity, so there's also a connection between, there's a fair amount of Jewish people in Mexico. In fact, the new president of Mexico is a Jewish woman.
Oh, I didn't know she was Jewish. I just knew she was a woman.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea.
Right. And like I remember, so I went to a very interesting private school in Chatsworth when I was a kid, and we had Spanish in elementary school, and the teacher was a Jewish Mexican, right? And her name was Senora Pintel. And the more I look into the background of like that school and what I was really doing there and all this kind of stuff, there's lots of other things going on. But yeah, no, there's a fair amount of Jewish people there, right?
Yeah,
It does seem to me that whether for whatever reason, and I'm not going to get into like because I don't know where this all begins, right? But that Jewish people and then like Aryan people, Germans, right, have been battling over access to temporal and dimensional portals for a really long quote time, which is something that I think
yeah,
we're very, very confused about what time actually is. I don't think time is a given. I think time is something that is inserted into a location as a measure of containment or control.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's the non-natural is no time. That's a natural state of being. I mean, people say, well, you need time to distinguish one point to another, but no, you don't. You don't need that at all. In no time, you can also distinguish one point to another. You just have the awareness of the whole instead of it being compartmentalized into chunks. So, yeah, you're right. It does feel like a method of control, and that's what I've kind of sensed in a lot of my dreams too, actually. Um,
So one
yeah,
of the things that connects, so cesium
yeah,
is the is part of nuclear weapons and warfare and all right, like cesium 137 is the radioactive like that's what you have where there has been nuclear activity, and then
yeah.
cesium 133, which is the neutral form of cesium, is how we keep time most specifically. In fact,
Mm.
Catholic monasteries are where this was sort of introduced. Like the quote unquote atomic clock uses cesium to calibrate time to the most specific, like to the tiniest fraction, right? And the
Huh.
term, right? And so when they started doing this, they introduced these clocks in the Catholic monasteries, and it and it helped keep the priest or the monk, whatever it was, like on their cycle of like when they were supposed to pray, when they're supposed to do whatever. But those clocks made noise that everybody in the town started arranging their realities around. So they weren't trying to control the people with it, but the people started naturally synchronizing with it, and then they realized that this was a good way to measure things in control, right? And so then they started introducing like the time clock at work and whatever it is, right? And there's even this term seize the day that comes from that, right? So literally how you time your day is with cesium. So like
Oh,
the
yeah,
embedded within some of these old Catholic sayings is actually like scientific knowledge of what is controlling the reality, right? Um, okay, so back to your Mesoamerican thing. Um, these can you say a little bit more about these deities or these interdimensional gods?
well, I can tell you about a dream I had a few couple months ago where I observed like from I guess you could call it, I like to call like the octopus mind, where your consciousness observes two things at once.
Mhm.
That's something you can do out of body. You can observe multitudes of things all at the same time. And so I saw this dark, malevolent, ancient. I don't know which. I'm not an expert on Mayan gods or anything whatsoever, but I could tell it was like a Mayan god of some kind, and it was in a cave,
Hmm.
and the cave was dimly lit, and it was actually, it looked like just the statue, but the statue was alive, like it
Okay.
was sentient,
Yep.
and it was in this cave, and I'm observing this, and it was almost as if it was waking up, like it was trying to come out of the statue,
Uh-huh.
and as I'm watching this god in the cave, at the same time on the surface I'm watching a shootout take place with drug cartels.
Okay.
So I'm
Yep.
seeing the
Yep.
bloodshed, and I'm linking the bloodshed directly to this deity. I in the dream I was able to sense that they're looping and connected. That the
Okay.
drug wars and the violence are tied back to ancient Mayan times,
Yep.
and that ancient energy is still controlling Mexico today.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, perfect, 100%. The moment you said octopus, I was going somewhere in my head. That
Yeah.
was a different example of the same thing that you just said. So I'll tell you what that is in a second. But I just Googled Mayan gods. And if you see one
Uh-huh.
that looks like the one you're talking about, then you tell me.
Okay. I will tell you, it's hard to, I mean, I wish I had some way to point though. You see the one with the really creepy grin face?
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like that. Very
Okay.
similar.
Okay. All right. So I knew you were going to say that. I already
You
knew you were
did?
going to say yes. Okay. So there's two things I want. So what you're talking about, I think, lends even more evidence to this idea of a hyperdimensional quote dance floor, right? And the only reason I'm saying
Yeah.
dance floor is because in the current reality that we live in, like you have these square or octagon or in some cases round shaped places where people go to hear loud sounds and there's like vibrations and they have sort of like exhilarating or out of body experiences, and we do this at raves or in clubs or festivals or whatever it is. But it would make sense that because whatever if we're understanding time as linear or maybe it's dimensional and it's just at different frequencies, if they were living out in the dirt somewhere, there's like not a nightclub like there is in the Gaslamp district or whatever, or in your personal case, maybe we call it the Gaslight district, right? um,
Yeah.
but but what they would do if they wanted to have like a party or a sound system or a room where they did that, they might put that inside the caves or the pyramids, and sunken down below is a floor where there's vibrations and intoxication, and they're using this to have out of body experiences or something like that, right? But what is going up above, right? Or what did I say? Up above, I mean outside in that
Yeah.
case, or even like in the dimension one up or one down from there, is connected in some way to that vibrational situation that's going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Couple of things. When sometimes when I'm at parties, like the parties that I go to are like in the craziest, weirdest fucking places. And I've always felt like the party is there because they need something to happen, that sound system and the exhilaration of people dancing opens up a field of energy that allows something else to happen. And like I remember this party getting shut down like last summer, and there was like a military guy outside, and I immediately felt like this had something to do with like the war in Ukraine. It's fucking weird, and like they were using this sound system to like interdimensionally traffic a soldier or someone specific through. And then when I was researching that location later, I found there's this Sears Tower in Los Angeles that to me looks like a Nazi panopticon watchtower. And on the top of the building, there's graffiti that says war, right? And it's like literally right, you can see it from where the party was, right? Like the party got shut down. Like I noticed something weird was going on. I said to my friend what was going on, and then the lights all went off and the sound went off and the party was over. 3 hours before it was supposed to be. Like the moment I noticed it, it had to stop or something like that. It was fucking weird, right? I've talked about it on the show. Okay. So one thing I noticed years ago, remind me about the octopus. We're going to come back to the octopus, but I want to talk about this god for a second, right? Okay. I remember being at this, I want to talk about the octopus. I want to talk about this gentleman he's been around for a long time, but all of our attention, whether you agree with him or disagree with him or believe him or don't believe him or like him or don't like him, suddenly he has a lot of attention on him. His name is Ammon Hillman, and I'll get to, so I want to tell you something about those, but this is the first thing that I want to tell you. So I was at this club in Los Angeles called Medusa, right? And it's interesting because Ammon Hillman talks about Medusa. And it was a club night, right? It was like a weekday night. And we were in the back room and they had a function one sound system there. And I saw this face in the speaker, right? So the speakers of the function one sound system, like I have gone over it over and over. I don't know if I've ever shown you, but I've told the audience, and if you would like me to take you through it, I will be happy to do it. I think it's used to penetrate the barrier between realms. And I can show you that in the design of the speaker, you can see literally, like it's, you know what the doctrine of signatures is? The doctrine of signatures is like when you look at a carrot, right? When you cut the cross section of the carrot, it looks like your eyes, and carrots are good for your eyes, right? And it's like the food that's shaped a certain way is good for the body part that's shaped that way. Like nature tells you what it's for. Okay.
Right.
So the design of the speaker literally is a picture of what it is doing to reality. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So and I can show you that if you like. But in the interest of time, unless you say you want me to show you, I'm just going to move on because my audience knows what I'm talking about. Do you want me to show you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me pull it up here. Okay. So function one sound system. All right, let me get a good picture going here so I can explain what I mean. All right, so function one sound system has become increasingly popular as dance music has become more popular, right? So you get these enormous stacks of speakers at events, right?
Okay.
But this is what like the speaker looks like, right? And then if you look at the logo for the company, it's showing you the inside of the speaker. Now, what does this look like to you?
A UFO.
There you go. Right? Okay, perfect. So this 4 lobes back here, the panels of the speaker, are what I call a quatrefoil or a 4-lobe shape, right? And then in the middle of that is what I call the 5th element, which is where something has to come through, right? So if you look at, do you know what a quatrefoil is?
No.
All right, I'm going to show you what a quatrefoil is. And this is really, you see these all the time. I want to go for this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know what that is.
For the specific one I'm talking about, though, you see these on church windows and in monasteries, all that kind of stuff, but it's also how the shape that is most important in drawing a Masonic floor or creating a universe or a reality, right?
Oh, wow.
Find the exact one let me find one that demonstrates exactly what I'm speaking about. So I can show you. So here we go. All right. So here,
don't different frequencies of sound, don't they create shapes like this as well?
Correct. Yes. Cymatics, right?
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah.
The 4 lobes, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Now let's go back and look at our function one sound system. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. When you look at coils, especially in mid-century modern design. So here's another one. This is a good one to show what I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the middle, right here, is a shape that looks like a diamond, which is also the inverse of the 4 lobe shapes. So when you connect the 4 lobe shapes, you get that in the middle, right? This would be an
Right.
opening where something could come through, right? It's like and then the next one creates the next one. Here's like an, let me see if there's another good version, like drawing version of it, right? There's all these different sort of graphs of how this could happen. But if you look at this in the middle, this is like the diamond almost, right? That is coming through it. And the experiences that I have with the function one sound system are different than the ones I have with other sound systems. There are other sound systems that create equally as interesting of experiences, but of a different quality, right?
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
so think about what we talk about when we're talking about what UFOs are. If they're
Yeah.
interdimensional, are they penetrating like the membrane of this reality and coming
Sure.
through from something else? And how are they doing that? They would have to be doing that by resonance, like how
Yeah.
they're vibrating to be able to move through what is otherwise a spatial or temporal barrier, right? Okay,
Exactly.
so that sound system seems to be operating on that principle. All right.
Mhm.
So I was at this club and I look over, and oftentimes I see like geometries coming out of the sound system, but I literally saw that God that we're talking about, that one you were talking about, that
Huh.
face was on the sound system. And I was not thinking about that, right? I was
Wow.
not,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
it's not, but at that time, I had a ring that had that face on it, and I was wearing that ring, right? And I have a ring now that has the geometries on it, right?
Oh, wow.
So like there was some sort of resonance, but I have seen both the Mayan gods or the Mesoamerican gods, because sometimes I see slightly different ones. They're not always exactly the same. And I can't tell if it's just different ornamentation because it's just like a different representation of the same god, or if it's like literally a different god, right? I've also seen some of the like Indian or Vedic ones, right? Like because they have their own versions of some of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff that, with the tongue sticking out and looking kind of
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah.
right? So I've seen both over time, right? Like but I knew you were gonna say that, right? So I think that what we think of as gods are intelligences or entities that have figured out how to move, how to like present themselves through vibration,
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. That's
right?
exactly it.
Okay. And so
They can penetrate multi realities, and they don't exist in just one singular reality. So they're existing in multi dimensionality, and they are present. It's sort of like their logo
yes,
in a
yes,
sense that they penetrate through other realities to influence the minds of quote unquote less evolved beings for whatever purpose. Could be nefarious purpose, could be a positive purpose, it could be neutral. It's just for whatever reason they have the ability to do that.
they have the ability to do it, and it may even be as simple as like anytime they're the exact frequency that they're associated with or the exact geometry that they're associated with
Yeah.
is achieved, they will show up. Now they may just show up for a second because it's like, oh, it's like frequency matching, right? Or they may be like, oh shit, I can come through here. I'm going to come through and I'm going to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like when you achieve that, those proportions, and whether those proportions are in geometry, like space or frequency, sound, like then like it shows itself because it's omniscient. It's there, and anytime you ring it up and you ring it up with its geometry or its frequency, it will answer the phone and say hello. You may have a
Right.
conversation, it may hang up on you or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so Ammon Hillman is this very interesting guy who's basically talking about ancient drug use, and that a lot of these characters, these like biblical characters or mythological characters, or maybe even Jesus Christ themselves, were traffickers.
Yeah.
They were engaged in a lot of these like rituals with chemicals, right? but derived from nature and sounds, so chanting or music, right?
Right.
To do specific things. And like, I think he's talking about it in a way that people are very easily offended by, but I think he means something a little more like what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Right. And if you have figured out how you can move matter up to and including yourself, but maybe it's even just items from one location to another, teleportation, interdimensional movement, to whatever kind of thing through this type of way. Like, it's not any different than taking something from California to Arizona. You're taking it over state lines, but this would be taking it over dimensional or
Yeah.
temporal lines. But if
Yeah.
you're doing that and you have figured out a way to do it that other people aren't privy to, like, that would be equal on some level to what we call traffic.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that some of these beings, whether they were singular individuals who were able to immortalize themselves in this way that they can work the sacred geometry of space, time, and sound in a way that makes them omnipresent or are able to be present all the time, whether
Yeah.
it's a single individual or whether it's a composite, whether it's a collection of an entire culture that preserved itself, like they made a composite entity, right? Like, think about like how certain Mesoamerican cultures disappeared from the face of the earth and
Yeah.
there's no evidence of them. Maybe they
Yeah.
figured out how to compartmentalize themselves into these quote unquote gods, right? And they're like literally like a interdimensional roaming tribe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Because
I
it's
think you're
weird.
onto something. Yeah.
Okay. So people who grow up in these places and do these ceremonies or engage in said rituals or religions, be they Mayans or Ukrainians, right? They are eating food that is grown on the ground where their ancestors are either buried
Yeah. Hmm.
or did these things. So, like, let's forget let's forget any like of our current conspiracy paranoia and say that we're talking about smart dust in an intelligent environment
Yeah.
that is recycling all the knowledge that has already been gained and then feeding it back to the next generation, right? And who is staying there. And then you start to wonder, like, have you watched that TV show Outer Range?
No.
You should watch it, Berdie. It's really good.
Okay.
Like, why there's so much turmoil over specific pieces of land.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So then I want to, so Ammon Hillman is interesting. You can watch. He's it takes him a few minutes to adjust to listening to him because he has a very unique way of speaking. But he was recently on the Danny Jones podcast, which is like one of these
Mhm.
guys that I'm like, well, why are we listening to this person and whatever? But there's sometimes interesting things there, right? And then you can kind of move out from there. He's written a very interesting, controversial book many years ago, many years ago in the 90s called The Chemical Muse that basically breaks down some of these ideas. He thinks that this is all encoded in ancient Greek, right? He thinks that the language of ancient Greek is basically almost like a sort of pharmacological manual
Yeah.
of like how to do this type of thing. From what I don't have a degree in Ammon Hellman yet. I'm working on it, right? But from what I'm extrapolating already, right? Which this has come for me for like a while. I've been talking about like, okay, like if we remove the part that people get so up in arms and rightfully so about like child trafficking and the things that go on around it, like what could be the other explanations? And what he's talking about is similar to some of the things that I have said in a completely different way because I don't know ancient languages over the last 2 years. Okay. Are you familiar with the octopus? Do you know what the octopus is?
Well, I know it in terms of Danny Casolaro and that story.
Okay.
If that's what you're referring to. I just meant it as I don't normally use that term. I just meant it as like a term to explain branching out your consciousness,
Okay,
basically.
but this is doctrine of signatures, right? This is what we
Okay.
were talking about, that things that look like a duck, quack like a duck, they're ducks, right? Um,
Yeah.
okay, so did you watch that new documentary series on Netflix called American Conspiracy?
Yeah.
Okay, so that piece of land that a lot of the story of this emanates from is that out near Palm Springs, right? At the
Right.
Indian reservation,
Cabazon.
Cabazon, right?
Yeah.
Which is also where, like, so and they're talking about like weapons trafficking and drug trafficking and
Yeah.
sex trafficking, but we're also talking about a Native American piece of land
Yeah.
that one of right, and we're talking about someone who's like a meth maker, possibly, right? We're talking about all kinds of weird intelligence agency, and the Netflix stuff is Netflix stuff. It's like propaganda with some truth in it and whatever. But if you start digging into this story, it's one of these things that's like the gift that never stops giving, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
But it's possible that that location is one of these locations, right?
Yeah.
So, like, think about this, like
All over Southern California.
all over Southern
All
California.
over.
But that area
And Mexico. Yeah.
specifically is very interesting because of its proximity to both Palm Springs and Joshua Tree,
Yeah.
right? And it's not it's and San Diego and Los Angeles. Do you remember like those dinosaurs there?
Yeah.
The eat dinosaurs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, do you remember that was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Yes. I'll
Right?
never forget.
All right. That the Pee-wee, like the Pee-wee's Big Adventure is another gift that always keeps on giving. But when I was little, whenever we used to drive to Palm Springs, I was sure, when I was little, so before I was a conspiracy theorist, I was sure that those dinosaurs were there because it was the clue that that's where Land of the Lost is. Did you ever watch that show when you were little? I think you're younger than me, but Land of the Lost?
Yeah.
I was certain of it, right? That dinosaurs really still existed and they were like in there. Not in the dinosaurs, but in the mountains behind where those dinosaurs were.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Uh-huh.
Right. So if we're dealing with a location, and then there's always Jurassic Park, which basically goes into that kind of idea, right? If we're
Yeah.
dealing with locations that are junction points or pathways or hyperdimensional dance floors where you can vibrate yourself into another time or another place, that seems like a pretty good location to me. What do you think?
I think that's why they built the portal structure right at the entrance when you enter Tijuana. I think that's a symbolic portal for, on the surface level, it's symbolic for immigration
Mm-hmm.
and movement and migration. But that portal structure, I don't know if you want to show people. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
The It's like this oval art piece that's right at the entrance, or right when you enter Tijuana, Mexico. So on the opposing side, on a deeper level, it represents you entering all of those nodal points that you just
What is
discussed.
it called so I can bring it up?
Um, I can't remember. It was something about time. Called a put a statue or time art statue Tijuana,
All right, hold on a second. Let's see if I can. Oh, here it is. Got it.
and I saw that exact same shape in a dream where it was literally a interdimensional gateway in that dream. It looked exactly like that sculpture, and then it emitted a lot of energy and light. When I went to that underground city and they told me it was 2086, they
Mm-hmm.
pushed me back into a portal that looked exactly like that thing.
Is that
Yes,
it?
that's it.
Okay.
It looked just, yeah.
Okay.
So people entering California from there are met with that. If they're migrating from South America or Central America, they're met with that because a lot of people come through Tijuana. It's a gateway It's a massive gateway, one of the world's biggest. And so they're entering all these dimensional gateways in California as they pass through that time gate right there. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I've seen so many versions of Tijuana in my dreams, maybe.
Okay, so I want to show you, I'm going to show you a couple of other cities that have things like this,
Oh,
right?
okay. I
And then,
didn't know that.
yeah, I'm going to show you some other cities and then we'll kind of finish up this hour and then I want to go into talking about the actual multiple dimensions of the cities, right? So here is the El Paso door. Check this
Oh,
out.
I've been to El Paso, so I should have seen it. I might have seen it then.
Check this out. There's a literal fucking door.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing that in El Paso, but
All right. And it's in the middle of this turnabout here, right?
yeah.
And on one side of the door is like the fanciest part of the city. And then if you walk past that, you go into something that looks like it's from like another time, right? Like I
Uh-huh.
want to see if they show so if you go down here, right? If you go down the one way or the other, you literally go from like a super fancy place with like high-end hotels and restaurants into what looks like a barrio from the 50s or 60s.
I do remember that about El Paso, that it did have that look. I don't remember that door. I was there quite a few years ago, though. That's interesting, though. Wow.
Okay. And so El Paso is one of the most Masonic cities in right? There's this Scottish Rite Freemason temple there that is not too far from where that door is. It's not super close, but I mean, it's like not like across the street, but it's just a few blocks away,
Wow.
right?
So is Buffalo, New York, by the way.
Yep.
Buffalo, New York is too.
It's never the biggest cities that are the most Masonic. It's sort of these like secondary cities, like in California, it's like Pasadena, right? In
I have
Texas,
no clue about Pasadena. Okay.
El Paso. In New York, it's like Buffalo or whatever it is, right? This
Yeah.
is this, right? Um,
That's
so
a crazy big temple there.
it's huge. Like it's one of
Yeah.
the,
I've
right?
been to the one in Washington, D.C. It actually looks pretty similar. Yeah, I
Right.
visited that one.
Um,
Yeah, you could take a guided tour and everything over there.
So El Paso is also one of the places where a lot of the immigrants are coming through,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
All along the border, right? So you have that there in Tijuana, you have that there in El Paso, right? If you go up to Detroit, which is a portal city that is
To Canada.
Canadian border,
Yeah.
right? And if you go to do you know Chad Stumpke? He's been on my show a couple of times. He's been around for a long time. Um,
Yeah.
he
So,
did
yeah.
okay. He did a series called Stargate Detroit, where he focused on Hart Plaza. Hart Plaza is
I
where
think I
the
saw that. Yeah. Sounds
Detroit
familiar.
Detroit Electronic Music Festival is there every year, but now they call it Movement now, which is an interesting name for it, right? Movement. Okay, so here, this is in, there's two. There's one that
Oh,
is
wow.
this way, but there's also this one this way, right? So
Oh,
one,
wow. That's in Detroit?
yeah, this is in
Oh,
Hart
wow.
Plaza, right in downtown Detroit. Okay, and
Huh.
here's the music festival happening it happens right there, like millions of people. Like there's one stage that is set up like right in front of it, right? And look at this, like with the water even like, okay.
Yeah. Interesting. And yeah, and then I found out about those pyramids in Montreal. So that's interesting. So you have a pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee. Then you
Right.
have pyramids in Montreal, and then you have these portals on these border cities. Okay.
So you have these kinds of portals on border cities, but then like in my own town, which I don't have everything, I should have sent a picture over, but if we go to Austin, which is not a border town, right?
Yeah.
It's so not Craigslist. Why are we going to Craigslist? It's not a border town. Um, it's a river town, right? There's a river that runs through it. A river
Yeah.
runs,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Okay. But there's these the way that these gateways reflect in the water. Let me see if I can find one. Let's see, Austin Lake reflection, lake reflections. I take pictures of these when the sun is perfect. See how the city reflects perfectly upside down?
Yeah. That's pretty though.
Right. I think this is a
I
portal.
like that.
This is a
Yeah.
portal of another kind, and there's certain bridge. Let me see if I can find one. I have the best versions of this on my own phone, but for some reason, my iPhone pictures don't transfer automatically. See how like everything is, this is the bridge, and that serves as like in between of the two cities. But they have some of these bridges that have these arches, and the way the arches reflect upside down in the water, you can see that it's another kind of portal, right? Let me see if I can find one that I'm Austin Lake Reflection Bridges. Here, look.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's reflecting under the water. But like, what if, like, what if that is true? What if that really is down there and there's a whole other version of Austin that is like a reverse on some
Oh,
level
absolutely.
of what we
Yeah,
have up top?
there's one below and there's another version in the sky too,
Correct. Yes.
in the clouds.
Yes.
So there's one in the water, one in the clouds, and then everywhere in between, like all the space is taken up by something. You just can't see it or comprehend it.
See how the
But
mist, see how the mist on this one almost looks like clouds? Like
yeah,
that's like probably what's up there.
yes, totally.
Right? So we have some cities, like it seems to me, and we're going to get into this in just a second, that we have some places where it's like they're showing you the doorway linearly, right? And some that they're showing you like a vertical door or a horizontal door.
Yeah,
And so, like, but I think that all of these that cities are these sort of interdimensional portals, and not that these interdimensional portals or okay, so I think we're dealing with dimension, which is sort of space, and we're dealing with time, which is different, right? So if we think of time, we're thinking past, future. If we're thinking space, we're thinking another version or up, down, right?
right.
Uh,
Yeah,
so I think that there's some cities that are more that like are dealing with one domain or the others, the domain of space or the domain of time, and maybe some cities are doing both, right? And there's probably other locations that are not cities where stuff like this happens, right? But I think cities are the most potent, right? Places where this can happen. And so I want to talk a little bit. Like, I think it's interesting that people who are highly aware are being encouraged to move away from cities. I think that's a psychological operation, right? You have all the
interesting.
truthers who are like, I'm going to move out to the country and get myself a farm and grow my own food and blah, 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 which there's nothing wrong with doing that if you like that, right? And the reason they're doing that is because they think there's going to be tyranny or chaos or whatever in the cities. And that may be true, right? That might be true. But there might also be, if like the people who are truthers are about to figure out that the world is interdimensional and time travel possible and blah, 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 then you've got them away from where all that stuff is happening. and you've got
That's a good point. Wow. That I think you're really onto something there.
right? Think about it.
Yeah,
If everybody who understands Tartaria,
yeah,
living out in the middle of nowhere where there's no buildings,
yeah. Right. Hmm.
so I'm more verbose. I talk more than you. I want to give you a chance to sort of, if you have thoughts about this, do this, and then we will wrap it up and go into talking about some of these weird dreams, visions, memories we have of different versions of the cities. But what do you think about that idea?
The idea that they're the truthers are moving out because they don't
No,
some
the idea that
uh,
cities are the epicenter of like the junction points for temporal or dimensional movement.
oh yeah, well they are because they're conduits for energy. So you ever see those videos where people compare like circuit boards to cities and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, it's there's sort of like spiritual circuit boards when you have like a collection or a mass of people consciousnesses going about doing myriads of things, and that activity alone doesn't have to be anything special, conducts an enormous amount of energy. So I think people are unknowingly opening and closing these portals just by moving about and being congregated in one location, if that makes sense. And so, and then their energy is, I guess you could say, being harvested and concentrated in these portals for other people to use that energy to jump through them, people who know how to do it or what it's really about. And it's actually kind of sad and a cop out too, because we're being used without us knowing that we're being used for that purpose. I think
So
people are unaware.
I think a couple of things are true, right?
Yeah.
So like I've been able to progress faster when I back myself up from assigning good, bad, positive, negative, like to any of this
Oh,
stuff,
me too. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because like pretty much everything is about power and genetics, right?
Yeah.
Like who you are and your relationship to power or energy, right? And are you consuming more or generating more, right?
Yeah.
And like all of these things exist, people are here, and power is a real thing, right? And when I say power, I don't necessarily mean people who have money and influence, so that's certainly an outgrowth of this, but they understand, the people who are able to develop wealth and influence, largely it's because they, self-made person or someone in their lineage, they're a child of money, recognized that what their relationship, what the like that relationship between power and genetics, right? And how to position yourself in accordance to your awareness of that, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so so cities are places where a lot of energy exists. Some people are generating it, others are consuming it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're all doing both, but like, the concept of like 0 point energy or over unity devices
Oh,
or,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The idea is like you achieve free energy when you are producing more energy than you consume. Okay. And so, like, if you've got millions of people in cities, some of them are going to produce more than they consume, right? And
True.
that leaves this free floating abundance around that you can do stuff with, right? And um, knowledge of how knowledge of yourself, of your own genetics. And when I say that, like, I'm not talking about it in terms of ethnicity and race and stuff and the way people think about it, but like, this is what I've got going on, and this is what's available in the environment. What can I do with it? It's very
Right.
basic human science, right? And so, and just there's a difference between knowing something and using it and not knowing it so you don't, and somebody stealing from you or blocking you from knowing or whatever it is. And the truth of the matter is that like a lot of this stuff, most people just haven't taken the time to sort of direct their energy to those ideas and learn to understand it for themselves. And if they did, they would
Right.
be able to avail themselves of a lot of the quote advantages that they see the people with wealth and influence having.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Um, let's do this. So I think how I'm going to do this is like, I always give everything to my listeners first, and then I put the first hour out publicly later at some point, but I always do it with like, there'll be like I know you have a lot of people who really like to follow your dreams and your conversations that are much more interested in you than they are in me. It always comes to promo code so they can come watch for free. Let's move over into the private segment, and let's really start to talk about what these multidimensional cities feel like and maybe some of the experiences in them. Because I actually asked you about this the first time we ever did a conversation, and you answered the question, but it was kind of like I wasn't sure you knew what I meant. And then when you started
Okay.
talking about this, I'm like, yes, this is what I meant, right? So everybody sort of arrives at seeing it a certain way, in their own time, or just the
Yeah.
language they use to describe it changes it, and then it comes into synchronicity. So I want to talk about this a little bit. And if you'd like to join us for that, you can go to patreon.com/off planet media, where there's a free week trial, or emilymoyer.locals.com, where there's a free month trial, and check out the second segment. But before we do, for people on my end who haven't, this is the first time they're meeting you, what would you like to say? Where can they find you? All that jazz.
Oh, well, I mean, you can find me all over. Sort of known for a near-death experience mostly, which I talked about a bunch of times on your show. But people are interested, they can. I was on a bunch of different podcasts talking about that particular experience, and then I also have a channel called Dreams and the Cosmic Trip, where I mainly share dreams and out-of-body experiences I've had over the years. So I keep that channel as a record keeper of my dreams so that they're not forgotten. And a lot of them I actually don't forget. They're stuck in my memory for good. So, yeah.
All right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So I love that connection of like, I knew when you talked about that, the Mayan god, like I knew exactly which one you were sort of talking about, right?
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like sometimes when we do these, like I was looking at your channel this morning as I was preparing, and your videos are often like 8 minutes, 12 minutes, right? Like you're kind of, you don't talk as much as I do, right? So it kind of feels like I love these chats where you come and you kind of tell me something and then we're able to extrapolate. And I also feel like sometimes I talk too much. So I hope people will go and listen to you, but you're just less words than me, right? Like
Yeah.
you remember your dreams better than me, and you're not quite as chatty in this realm. So guys, go check out his channel. He's posting stuff all the time in community chat, right? He posts his synchronicities and his 9/11s and his, all of
Six, six, six.
that, all of that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it's interesting to sort of track, because you always are posting things that like are happening to all of us, or that we're noticing, or whatever it is. And then the way it sort of ties into what you're reporting about your dreams and out of body experiences are always interesting. So go check Berdie out. His name is Daniel Berdichevsky. If you're looking for his,
Yeah, if you put in that name and put near death experience, you'll find a bunch of podcasts if you want to check out that story too. Just that name on YouTube or whatever. Yeah.
yes, I call him Berdie, but that's not what everyone else calls him.
Yeah.
So anyhow, all right, we're going to move over to the second segment. We'll see you over there.